My brother told the police he stole from our parents' safe. Check his account. They believed him without asking me. 2 weeks later, my lawyer pulled the bank records, and every single withdrawal had my brother's signature on it. Hey Reddit. I'm Merrick, 31, project estimator for a commercial construction firm in Virginia. I make $78,000 a year before taxes. Drive a 2019 Tacoma I bought used with 40,000 miles on it. And I've been renting a 2-bedroom apartment by myself since I was 26 because I like quiet and I don't like roommates. I run 3 miles every other morning on a route that passes a middle school and a Walgreens and a creek that smells like copper after it rains. I own a cast iron skillet I've had since college that I've never once washed with soap because a roommate told me not to freshman year, and I believed him, and now it's a personality trait. I pay my bills on the first of the month, every month, because my father taught me that, and it's one of the few things he taught me that actually stuck. My brother Rafferty is 2 years older than me. He works in logistics for a regional trucking company, makes about $52,000, and lives in a 2-bedroom apartment 8 miles from our parents' house. That's the apartment we all knew about. The one we didn't know about was a 3-bedroom rental 40 minutes north, where a woman named Brinley lived with a 4-year-old boy who had Rafferty's jawline and my mother's eyes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. When Rafferty and I were kids, he was the one who showed up. That's the simplest way to say it. When I was 11 and wiped out on my bike hard enough to need stitches, Rafferty ran 3 blocks to the house, grabbed my mom, and held a towel against my knee the whole way to the ER. He was 13. He didn't panic. He just held the towel and told me to stop looking at it. I remember the towel was blue and it turned purple from the blood, and Rafferty never flinched. In the waiting room, he sat next to me and we didn't talk, and I could feel the dried blood on my shin cracking every time I moved my leg, and Rafferty just sat there, elbow touching mine, like that was enough. That's who he was. That's who I thought he still was. Our parents, Calloway and Celine, are both retired. Dad worked 31 years at the same manufacturing plant. Mom did billing at a dentist's office for 22 years. They aren't rich, but they're careful. They saved. They kept a fireproof safe in the back of their bedroom closet, the kind you buy at a hardware store for $200, bolted to the floor with a combination lock that clicked twice to the left and once to the right. Inside that safe they had cash, bonds, my mother's jewelry, and about $140,000 in savings that my father had been setting aside since before I was born. Rafferty had the combination since he was 19 because he lived closest and my parents trusted him to handle things when they traveled. I never asked for the combination. I had my own money and my own life 40 minutes south, and I didn't think about the safe because I didn't think I needed to. For the past few years, Rafferty always seemed fine. Drove a decent car. Ate out. Posted pictures on Instagram of restaurants and weekend trips that looked like a guy in his early 30s living within his means. Nobody questioned it. Nobody did the math. That's the thing about family. You believe what's easiest to believe because the alternative requires a conversation nobody wants to have. Then one evening in March, I was sitting on my couch eating leftover Thai food from a container I'd been eating out of for 2 days, which is fine, and somebody knocked on my door. Not a normal knock. Cop knock. 3 hard ones that rattled the chain. I opened the door, and there were 2 officers and a plainclothes detective standing under my porch light. The detective, a woman named Sergeant Cooper, asked me if I was Merrick Hugh Parker. I said yes. She asked if I could step outside. I could smell my pad thai getting cold behind me. I stepped outside. She said they needed to talk to me about a theft from my parents' residence. I said, what theft? She said a report had been filed alleging that I had been stealing cash and bonds from a safe in my parents' home over the past several months. I said that's not possible. I said I haven't been to my parents' house since Christmas. She said the report was detailed. Specific dates, specific amounts, specific denominations. I said who filed the report. She looked at me the way people look at you when they already know you're not going to like the answer, and they're deciding how much space to give you before they say it. She said, your brother. I don't remember what I said next. I remember my hand was still on the door frame, and my thumb was pressing into the wood hard enough to leave a mark, and the porch light was buzzing above my head, and I remember thinking the word brother like it was in a language I didn't recognize. They took me in for questioning. Not arrested yet, but I sat in a room with fluorescent lights that buzzed at a frequency that made my teeth feel wrong, and I answered questions for 2.5 hours. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't think I needed one because I hadn't done anything. That was stupid. I know that now. I know a lot of things now. I called my parents that night. My mother picked up. I said, Mom, Rafferty told the police I stole from the safe. She was quiet for about 4 seconds, which doesn't sound long until you're counting them on a kitchen floor at midnight with your forehead against the cabinet door. Then she said, Merrick, we already know. Rafferty told us everything. Everything. He told them everything. And they believed him. By the following Tuesday, I was formally arrested. I sat in a holding cell that smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee, and the bench was cold through my jeans, and my phone was in a plastic bag at the front desk, and nobody from my family called to ask if I was okay, because nobody from my family thought I was innocent. My mother told my aunt I had always been jealous of Rafferty. She told my Uncle Grayson the same thing. She told the neighbors. She told people at church. My father changed the locks on the house. Not a metaphor. He drove to Home Depot the day after my arrest, bought new deadbolts, and installed them himself. My parents, who still believed they had $140,000 in a safe, hired a lawyer for Rafferty. Not for me. For Rafferty. To help him manage the stress of reporting his own sibling. That lawyer cost them $15,000. $15,000 to comfort the person who was robbing them, paid out of the same savings he was draining, while the son who hadn't taken a cent sat in a holding cell with nothing. I spent 11 days as the suspect. 11 days of my co-workers going quiet when I walked past the break room, and then talking again once I turned the corner. 11 days of my boss, Stellan, calling me into his office and saying take whatever time you need, which is the professional version of please don't be here. 11 days of eating food that had no flavor and sleeping in a bed that felt like it belonged to someone else. I drove past my parents' house at 2 a.m. once because I couldn't sleep. The new deadbolts caught the streetlight, and the front door looked like it belonged to a different house entirely. I sat in my truck across the street with the engine running and the heat on, and looked at the house I grew up in and realized I wasn't welcome there. I put the truck in drive and went home and sat in my kitchen and pressed my forehead against the counter because the counter was cold and the cold felt like something, which was better than the nothing I'd been feeling all week. During those 11 days, nobody from my family called. Not my parents, not my aunts, not my cousins. Grayson called once, my father's brother, but I didn't pick up because I didn't know yet that he was on my side. I thought everyone had decided. I found out later that my mother had been making calls, telling people her version. Her version was that I'd always resented Rafferty for being closer to them, that I'd been struggling financially, that she wasn't surprised. None of that was true. I make $78,000 a year, and I have $31,000 in savings, and I've never once asked my parents for money. But a mother's voice carries weight, and by the time I was cleared, half my extended family had already convicted me over a phone call they never gave me a chance to answer. On day 3, I called my college buddy Zayden. Zayden is a defense attorney. I should have called him on day 1. He said, Merrick, stop talking to the police, stop talking to your family, stop talking to anyone, and come to my office in the morning. I went. His office smelled like printer toner and cold coffee, and there was a basketball on top of his file cabinet that I stared at while he read the police report, because looking at the basketball was easier than looking at anything else. Zayden read the report. Then he read it again. Then he leaned back and said, Merrick, this statement is rehearsed. I asked what he meant. He said nobody files a genuine theft report with this level of detail. Specific dates going back months. Dollar amounts down to the denomination. Which bills came from which section of the safe. Rafferty didn't report a theft. He submitted a script. Zayden said real victims say I think, and maybe around, and I'm not sure exactly when. Rafferty's statement read like he'd been writing it at his kitchen table for weeks. The statement wasn't a report. It was a performance. Then Zayden pulled the bank records. This is the part 1 replay more than any other part. More than the arrest. More than my mother's silence. This part. He subpoenaed withdrawal records from the bank branch closest to my parents' house. It took about a week. When the records came back, Zayden called me to his office and put 23 withdrawal slips on the table in a row, like cards in a game I didn't want to play. He didn't say anything at first. He just laid them out, one by one, left to right, like he was dealing a hand. 23 slips. Yellowed carbon copies with dates and amounts and signatures. I picked up the first one. The signature at the bottom was not my handwriting. It was Rafferty's. The R with the extra loop at the top that he's done since high school. I picked up the second one. Rafferty's. Third, fourth, fifth. All 23. Every single withdrawal had my brother's signature on it. His handwriting slanting left the way it always did, neat and careful. The same handwriting from birthday cards and grocery lists and a Christmas card he sent me 2 years ago that said, "Proud of you, bro," and a police report that blamed me for what those same hands had been doing for 18 months. I sat there and pressed my palms flat against the wood and stared at Rafferty's name written 23 times, and my ears were ringing the way they do after a loud noise, except there wasn't any noise. Zayden's office was quiet. The basketball sat on top of the file cabinet. The printer hummed in the other room. And I sat there with 23 pieces of paper that proved my brother had stolen $94,000 from our parents and then told the police it was me, and I couldn't feel my hands. Part of me wanted to drive to his apartment and stand in his doorway and hold up every single slip one at a time and not say a word. Part of me wanted to call my mother and read her every signature over the phone, slowly, so she could hear each one. And a small part of me, the part one don't talk about, wanted to go home and put the slips in a drawer and close it and pretend I never saw any of it, because knowing this meant my brother was gone, and the person left in his place was someone I'd have to look at across a courtroom, and the blue towel turning purple was never going to mean the same thing again. Zayden lined the withdrawals up by date. 18 of the 23 fell within 48 hours of the first of the month. Every month. For 18 months. He said, "What's due on the first of every month?" I said, "Rent." He said, "Whose rent?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "We're going to find out." What Zayden found was Brinley, a 3-bedroom apartment 40 minutes north in a town called Ashford. Rent $1,850 a month. A 4-year-old son named Tatum. A woman who believed Rafferty was divorced and that his family had abandoned him after the split and that the money he brought home came from a legal settlement he'd received years ago. Every dollar was stolen. Brinley was living inside a story Rafferty had built for her, the same way my parents were living inside a story Rafferty had built for them, and I was living inside a police report Rafferty had built for me. 3 different lies for 3 different audiences, and every single one of them was funded out of the same fireproof safe bolted to the floor of a bedroom closet in a house where the locks had been changed to keep me out. Brinley was 7 months pregnant. Rafferty had been increasing the withdrawal amounts over the last 4 months because there was another baby coming. A second child funded with cash from a safe that belonged to 2 retired people who thought their savings was sitting exactly where they'd left it. The amounts went from $3,200 a month to $5,400 in the last 3 months. He needed a bigger crib, a second bedroom's worth of furniture, prenatal appointments paid in cash because Brinley didn't have insurance and Rafferty told her he'd handle it. He handled it with my father's retirement money. I found that out in Zayden's office. I stood up and walked to the window and looked at the parking lot. I could see my truck. I could see a woman loading bags into a minivan and a bird sitting on a parking meter like none of this was happening. I stood there for a long time. Zayden didn't rush me. Behind me, I could hear him turning pages. Outside, the bird flew away. Zayden found the postal redirect form next. Filed 14 months earlier at the local post office. Rafferty had rerouted our parents' bank statements to a P.O. box 12 miles from their house. His signature was on the form. For 14 months, my parents never received a single bank statement. They had no idea their savings were draining because the person they trusted to live closest had made sure the evidence went somewhere else. 14 months of statements sitting in a metal box at a post office on Route 9 while my parents sat in their kitchen thinking everything was fine. The total amount stolen was $94,200. Rafferty's salary was $52,000. He'd been living a $146,000 lifestyle on paper. When the court ordered financial disclosure, his checking account had $611. Credit cards maxed. Car lease 3 months behind. Every dollar he stole went out as fast as it came in. Rent, groceries, furniture, baby supplies, restaurant meals, weekend trips with Brinley, the appearance of being a man who had his life together. $611. That's what was left. 3 months before the police report, Rafferty applied for a home equity loan against my parents' house. Used their address, their property value, filled out the forms as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The application was denied because he wasn't on the title and had no legal authority over the property. Not yet, anyway. The draft POA my mother found later would have fixed that. When the legal route to more money failed, he went harder on the safe. Bigger withdrawals. shorter gaps between them. The last 4 months before the report, he took more than he'd taken in the entire first year. He was running out of road, and instead of stopping, he pressed the gas and pointed the car at me. A bank teller named Hadley came forward on her own. She'd seen Rafferty's name in the news, recognized him, and walked into the branch manager's office the next morning. She said Rafferty came in once a month, sometimes twice, always cash, always nervous, always alone. He'd tap his fingers on the counter while she counted the bills and never made small talk. She said he always smelled like fast food and his collar was always wrinkled, and he never once looked her in the eye. She was unwrapping a granola bar when she told Zayden this, like it was just another Tuesday for her, which I suppose it was. Then my Uncle Grayson showed up. Dad's brother. Quiet guy. Drives a Buick LeSabre that's older than some of Zayden's interns. Coaches Little League on Saturdays. Mine's his business. But Grayson had been watching Rafferty's Instagram for months. Expensive dinners. Weekend getaways. Tagged restaurants with prices visible in the background. Grayson didn't say anything to anyone in the family. He just started screenshotting. Dates, locations, dollar amounts you could estimate from menus visible in photos. He cross-referenced them with what he knew about Rafferty's salary. When Zayden filed the motion to dismiss charges against me, Grayson drove to Zayden's office and put a USB drive on his desk. Said, this might be useful. Every screenshot matched a withdrawal date within 72 hours. Zayden subpoenaed Rafferty's phone records. Found a group chat with 2 friends. In that chat, Rafferty called the safe the old man's retirement fund. He bragged about it. Said the best part was that I'd take the fall because, and this is a direct quote from the court exhibit, Merrick's the quiet one. Quiet ones always look guilty. His friends sent laughing emojis. One of them typed, bro, you're wild. Nobody said stop. Nobody said maybe don't steal from your parents. Nobody said anything that a decent person would say. They just laughed. My parents had a Ring camera on the front porch. Installed it 2 years ago after a package got stolen off the steps. Rafferty was the one who set it up. He didn't know the footage was stored in the cloud and not just on the base unit inside the house. Zayden pulled 14 months of archived video. 41 entries of Rafferty walking into the house alone, going to the back of the house where the bedroom was, leaving within 8 to 12 minutes. 41 times. Some of the timestamps were 10 p.m., 11 p.m., once at 6 a.m. He'd park in the driveway, walk in with his key, go straight to the back, and leave. Every single time. I appeared on that camera 0 times during the same 14 months. Not once. The camera Rafferty installed to protect the house recorded him robbing it 41 times. 6 of the 23 withdrawals happened on dates when I was confirmed out of state. Flight records from a trip to Baltimore for a site survey. Hotel bookings in Raleigh for a 3-day project. Work logs signed by general contractors in Maryland and North Carolina with my name and the date. I was physically not in Virginia for 6 of the transactions Rafferty told the police I committed. One of them happened on a Tuesday when I was standing in a parking garage in Charlotte looking at a structural column with a crack in it and calling my project lead about rebar costs. I wasn't robbing a safe. I was doing my job 400 miles away. Zayden laid all of it out for the prosecutor in a single meeting. The prosecutor dropped the charges against me the same afternoon. I was eating a sandwich in Zayden's break room when he came in and told me, turkey on wheat. I put the sandwich down. I never picked it back up. Somebody probably threw it away that evening. I think about that sandwich sometimes, which is a strange thing to think about, but your brain holds on to what it wants. Update 1. The week after my charges were dropped, Brinley contacted Zayden. Not because we found her, because she found us. She'd searched Rafferty's name after seeing something online, read the filings, and realized the life she'd been living was built on stolen money. She came to Zayden's office with a folder. 18 months of rent receipts, all cash, all handed to the landlord by Rafferty in person. Utility bills paid with cash Rafferty provided. A photo of a crib he'd bought with the receipt still taped to the box. $340. Purchased 2 days after a $4,800 withdrawal. She said she'd been collecting things that didn't add up. Quietly. The way people do when they don't want to believe what they're holding. Brinley told Zayden that Rafferty said he was divorced. Said his family had turned their back on him. Said the money came from a legal settlement. She believed him because he was consistent and because the alternative was that the father of her children was someone she couldn't let into her house, and she was 29 and pregnant and didn't want that to be real. The same week, Rafferty panicked. After the bank records went public in the court filing, he contacted Sergeant Cooper and offered her $5,000 to lose the new evidence. He called her personal cell, which he'd gotten from the original report because she'd given him her card when he filed it, back when she thought he was a concerned brother doing the right thing. Cooper recorded the call. She let him talk for 11 minutes. He offered the money twice. He said he could get it by Friday. He couldn't. He didn't have $5,000. He didn't have $500. He was offering to bribe a detective with money he didn't possess, which tells you everything about how he operated. Promise first, figure it out later, and when later comes, steal from someone who trusts you. Cooper played the recording for the DA the next morning. Rafferty was charged with attempted bribery on top of theft and fraud. His first lawyer dropped him within 48 hours of hearing the recording. A second lawyer took the case, reviewed the full evidence folder, asked for 2 days to prepare a strategy, and dropped him after one. Zayden said he'd never seen 2 attorneys bail that fast. Then again, Rafferty wasn't really a paying client. He didn't have any money that actually belonged to him. Update 2. My mother found out about Brinley before the trial. She was cleaning Rafferty's old room at my parents' house, the room he kept for storage, and found a phone in a shoebox under the bed. She opened it. The lock screen was a photo of Brinley and the boy. She scrolled through the camera roll. Birthday parties with streamers and cake. Grocery runs. A Christmas morning in a living room she'd never seen, with a tree and presents and a little boy opening a fire truck on a carpet my mother had never walked on. The boy looked like Rafferty did at that age. Same jaw. Same tilt of the head. My mother's eyes looking back at her from a phone screen in a room that smelled like dust and old laundry. She sat on the bed for 2 hours. When she finally called me, she didn't apologize. She said, "Merrick, did you know about the little boy?" I said no. She said, "He looks like your father." I could hear her breathing on the other end, and I stood in my kitchen holding the phone, and neither of us said anything for a while. 3 days later, my father had a cardiac episode. Stress-induced. For days in the hospital. They needed insurance documents and account information, which meant digging into the financial reality Rafferty had spent 18 months burying. The doctor explained the procedure. A nurse hummed something I didn't recognize while adjusting the 4. My father asked to see me. Not Rafferty. Me. I sat in a chair next to his bed. The monitor beeped behind his shoulder. His hand had tape on it from the 4, and his fingernails looked thinner than I remembered. He looked at me and said, "I should have asked you first." 6 words. From a man who changed the locks on his own son. I didn't respond. I looked at his hand and the tube running into his wrist, and I let those 6 words sit in the room like something heavy that had been set down and couldn't be picked back up. During the hospital paperwork, my mother found a draft power of attorney in Rafferty's handwriting. Never filed, but complete. It would have given Rafferty legal control over all family finances, accounts, property, the house, everything. He'd written it out in full, dated it. He just hadn't submitted it yet. He wasn't only stealing cash from a safe. He was planning to take legal ownership of everything our parents had. The POA was the document that made the whole thing click. This wasn't a desperate man grabbing money to survive. This was a man building a takeover one document at a time. Rafferty's employer found out. HR pulled his expense reports after the charges became public. Padded mileage. Fake client meetings. Reimbursed lunches that never happened. Hotel rooms billed to the company that he used for nights at Brinley's apartment when he told his real life he was on the road. A second layer of fraud at a company that had nothing to do with our family. He was stealing from every direction he could face. Fired for cause. No severance. No unemployment. No reference letter. The HR director, according to Zayden, said she'd never seen a cleaner termination case. She also said, off the record, that 3 other employees had flagged Rafferty's mileage logs over the past year, and nobody followed up. Sometimes the system works. Sometimes it waits until the building is on fire. Brinley left him. Packed up the 3-bedroom apartment in Ashford over a weekend while Rafferty was in county lockup. Took both kids, the furniture he'd bought with stolen money, and a box of receipts she'd been keeping. Moved to her mother's place out of state. Filed for child support against a man with no job, no savings, $611 in his checking account, and a criminal record that was still growing. The family Rafferty built with stolen money doesn't exist anymore. The apartment is empty. The crib he bought for $340 2 days after a $4,800 withdrawal is in a storage unit in Virginia. Brinley didn't take it. She said she didn't want anything in her new house that was paid for with someone else's retirement. Rafferty tried to run, bought a one-way Greyhound ticket 2 states over, packed a duffel bag with clothes and a phone charger and whatever else you pack when you're leaving your life behind at a bus terminal that smells like diesel and floor wax. Got flagged at the station because Zayden had already filed a motion restricting his travel. Local police found him in the terminal sitting on a plastic chair near Gate 7 with the duffel bag between his feet and a wallet with 2 maxed credit cards and $38 in cash. Brought him back. Judge revoked bail. Rafferty went from 2 households and a $146,000 lifestyle to a man in county lockup because he tried to board a Greyhound with a duffel bag and no plan and $38 that was probably the last honest money he had. Final update. The trial lasted 3 days. The courtroom was small, and the overhead lights were the kind that make everyone look slightly sick, and the chairs were hard plastic that squeaked every time someone shifted. Brinley came on the second day. She brought the boy, Tatum. I don't think she planned it that way, but when she walked in with him on her hip, my mother saw him from across the room. The whole courtroom saw him. He didn't just look like Rafferty. He looked like our father. He looked like me. The family resemblance was so precise. The jawline, the way he gripped Brinley's collar with one small hand and looked around the room with eyes that were my mother's eyes, that Celine started crying before anyone spoke a word. She was looking at a grandchild she'd never met. In a courtroom, because her favorite son stole enough money to build a family she was never told about while framing the other son for it. The boy looked at my mother crying and turned his face into Brinley's shoulder, and Brinley put her hand on the back of his head and didn't look at anyone. I watched all of this from 3 rows back. The boy's hair was the same shade of brown mine was when I was 4. I know that because there's a photo on my parents' mantle of me at that age, and I've looked at it 1,000 times, and now there was a living version of it sitting in a courtroom 10 feet from the grandmother who didn't know he existed. Rafferty was convicted on 12 counts. Theft, fraud, filing a false police report, attempted bribery, forgery. The last piece of evidence Zayden presented was the timeline. The safe had been fully emptied 7 months before Rafferty filed the police report. 7 months. He'd already taken everything. Every dollar. Every bond. The jewelry. The report wasn't panic. It was preemptive. He knew eventually someone would open that safe and find nothing, and he wanted the story to already be written when they did. He didn't frame me because he got caught. He framed me on a schedule. Sat at his kitchen table, wrote that detailed statement with my name in it, memorized the dates from his own withdrawal slips, and walked into a police station on a Tuesday afternoon like he was dropping off dry cleaning. That's the part one keep coming back to. 7 months. He had 7 months of knowing what he was going to do to me. 7 months of Sundays at my parents' kitchen table eating my mother's pot roast and looking at me across the table knowing he'd already written the report, and he did it anyway. Where things stand. Rafferty is serving 3 to 6 years. Restitution ordered. $94,200 plus $18,600 in legal fees plus fines. Credit destroyed. Name on a public record that comes up when you search him. The 2-bedroom apartment 8 miles from my parents is gone, lease broken, deposit forfeited. The 3-bedroom in Ashford is empty. Brinley won't speak to him. Filed a restraining order after sentencing. Both children are with her mother in another state. His friends from the group chat stopped answering his calls after the chat was entered into evidence. Turns out laughing emojis don't hold up well in a courtroom. His second lawyer sent a final invoice he can't pay. His car was repossessed in the jail parking lot. The man who had the combination to $140,000 now has a commissary balance that his parents refused to fund. My father is home. Slower. Quieter. Sits on the porch in the evenings and watches the street. My mother calls me once a week now. Sure calls. Weather. How's work? She hasn't apologized for believing Rafferty. Hasn't apologized for the locks. The lawyer, telling the family I was jealous. I don't know if she will. I don't know if it would merit her if she did. Part of me wants to hear it. Part of me thinks hearing it would make it worse, because then I'd have to decide what to do with it. I'm back at work. Stellan never asked what happened. He just said, "Glad you're back," and handed me a project file for a hospital renovation in Richmond. He has a photo on his desk of an ex-wife he never talks about, and I think he understood more than he let on. I got a raise in June that I didn't ask for. I'm looking at buying a place, something small, maybe a townhouse with a garage where I can set up a workbench and not think about anything for a while. Zayden says the civil suit for wrongful damages is strong. He's filing against the county for the arrest and against Rafferty personally for the false report, though collecting from a man in prison with negative net worth is more principle than profit. Grayson still texts me screenshots sometimes. Old habit. He sends them at odd hours, midnight, 6 a.m., like he's scrolling through something and can't help himself. I don't think he knows how to stop watching. I don't think I want him to. Last Thursday, I made pasta. Nothing special. Penne, Jared sauce, garlic bread from a bag because I still can't make it from scratch without burning the bottoms. I had the TV on in the other room, some basketball game I wasn't watching, and the kitchen smelled like butter and garlic and the window was cracked because the smoke detector in my new apartment is sensitive to everything. I put the plate on the table. Sat down. Ate. The apartment was quiet. Not the kind of quiet where you're waiting for something. The kind where nothing is coming. I sat down and nobody asked me where the money went. Anyway, that's it. If you made it this far, appreciate you. Subscribe, leave a comment, whatever feels right. More coming.